It's time now for Back Pages Tonight, right here on Sky Sports News. We're bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. There are our guests joining us tonight. The Guardian's Jonathan Liew, Jason Burt from the Telegraph. Evening to you both. Very much like Gareth Southgate on Saturday, there are some big decisions being taken in the UK this evening. It is election night, it has been polling day, and as a result of that, some of the back pages still to arrive into us. But we're going to start off with England, Jason, and the piece that you've written in the Telegraph. And talking about Gareth Southgate, he's been given this clean slate. He's got to make sure that he uses it to best effect. Tell us a little bit about your piece and the challenge now that faces Gareth Southgate in a couple of days' time.
Well, I've covered a lot of tournaments, and this has been one of the strangest I've ever covered, really, in terms of England. The perception of England and also how England have performed. Clearly, they haven't played very, very well so far, but they won their group. They're into the quarterfinals. Some big names have already gone out of the competition. And yet there seems to be an awful lot of anger, an awful lot of unhappiness around the fans and around, obviously, the reporting and talking about England. But I think sometimes we just have to kind of step back and think, well, look, they've made it to the quarterfinals. This is really kind of the business end of the competition now. It's the bare minimum what they needed to achieve in terms of what England have done in the past. Certainly prior to Southgate, quarterfinal was always seen as a reasonable achievement. Clearly not good enough, but you know, if they'd have gone out to Slovakia in the last round, it would have felt, and I think there would have been a lot of people talking about being a sort of Iceland Mark II and almost Gareth Southgate coming full circle. So he saved himself that embarrassment. But I think really we need to try and look at it now as an opportunity. You know, the draw has opened up because England won the group. They haven't been lucky. It's because they won the group. They've got an opportunity, the highest ranked team left in their half of the draw. And obviously a couple of big nations will go out tomorrow night. So there is an opportunity there to really kind of try and go again. I mean, Harry Kane spoke earlier on in the tournament, once the group stage was over, that he comes alive in the knockout games. England really need to start doing that. And I think really it's an opportunity for them now to try and put down a sort of a proper marker, because so far it's been quite a difficult tournament. They haven't played well. They know that. There's lots of reasons why. And really, I think it's a great opportunity for them really to do much better now. But obviously, I'm trying to be wildly optimistic about it at the same time.
Jonathan, when we think about just how England have been, not just in this tournament, but the mood music in the last few days, John Stones saying that they've been motivated by this criticism. A pint to prove, obviously, reference to the plastic beer cups that were chucked at Gareth Southgate. What do you think, if anything, can actually have been addressed over the last few days? How deep do you think the conversations have got? Is it proper soul-searching, or is it just, I suppose, a reset, as Jason is alluding to?
Yeah, I guess there's two separate issues here. I think the tactics, the styles of play, the patterns of play, certainly the personnel, that stuff is pretty much hardwired, and I think that is linked to the evolution or de-evolution, you might call it, of the team over the last 2 or 3 years. That stuff is fixed. You know, you're not going to just magic up a box-to-box, a new box-to-box central midfielder in the next 48 hours. So that stuff is, that's what you can't change. You can fiddle around with 3 at the back or 4 at the back or whatever. But the patterns of play of a Southgate tournament side, we kind of know what to expect from them. What you can change, I think, is, I guess, the vibes. It was interesting seeing John Stones talking about the extra motivation that they would have got from, or that Gareth Southgate would have got from the reception he received. On the face of it, it rings a few alarm bells, because, like, why do you need that extra motivation? You're playing for England in a major tournament. But I guess it's whatever works, right? If that kind of thing helps them create a sort of siege mentality, and they want to show us, us plebs back at home or, in the stands that they knew what they were doing all along, and that helps them bond and that helps them gel, and it gives them a fuel, the fuel to get through these next 3 games, then I don't think people will begrudge them that at all. It's obviously not a sustainable. It's not a sustainable model, but tournaments aren't about that. They are about finding the right blend of kind of emotions and messages to get you performing on that day.
You mentioned about sort of fiddling around with the 3 at the back, 4 at the back, and that's the big question tactically, which has come about in the last couple of days. Jason, if we look at the back page of The Sun, match of the spray, and again, featuring John Stone's comments, let's get those beers flying again, defend, of course, for fluid football to return. 3 at the back, does that enable more fluid football?
Yeah, just want to address the question of Southgate and the beer cups being thrown at him first. I mean, basically, it wasn't about motivation. I think he's actually angry about it. I think he's actually quite disappointed and fairly sort of disenchanted with the reaction that evoked, because England had won the group, and I know they haven't played well. He knows they haven't played well. This is tournament football. I think the anger that's been directed towards England is a bit disproportionate. I understand it to a degree, but I think people have got themselves very, very angry. It's probably because it's a very poor summer in England. The general elections obviously got everyone very, very down as well in terms of how a bit of a mess that is. Obviously, finally, that's coming to a head and finishing tonight. And I think that obviously people seem to have got very much sort of worked up about it. And I'm hoping that things change. With the three at the back, I think it's partly driven by Mark Gahey's suspension. Obviously, they're probably going to put Ezri Konsa in there, who hasn't played an awful lot of games at centre-half for England. I think they feel that three at the back gives a little bit more extra security. It also matches up Switzerland. England have done this before in tournament football, not in the last World Cup, but in the last Euros. They played against Germany with three at the back and won 2-0. And they started the final against Italy with three at the back and did quite well. So I think it's a system they've used before. I don't think it's a panic measure. I think it's trying to sort of think about what the best way of getting the use of the personnel available to them. I think with all the attacking options England have got, some people may be a bit disappointed with that. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, maybe it's Southgate's tactics, maybe it's the players themselves, those attacking options haven't flourished. So I can see why he's doing this, and I think it's not an illogical move. I don't think it's 100% settled yet, but I think it's something obviously they've been doing in training, and hopefully it'll work for them if they do it.
When you think about this potential 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-3, Jonathan, yes, it's matching up to Switzerland, as Jason says, but I do wonder if you think about maybe Bukayo Saka playing as one of the wing-backs, maybe Trent as one of the other ones, and Foden and Bellingham therefore behind Kane, probably Mainu alongside Rice. That means no Cole Palmer again from the start, no Anthony Gordon from the start, no Ivan Toney from the start. Do you think it is the right kind of tactic, or do you think it's a little bit of stubbornness that all of the players that people are calling to start are not in this 11 probably?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately you have to trust the judgment of the guy who's watching them train, who is in the camp and who has to make that judgment call. I've seen a couple of Switzerland's games. I've been at a couple of Switzerland's games this tournament, the game against Germany, and then obviously when they beat Italy in Berlin last weekend. And that left-sided triangle where Ricardo Rodriguez comes up from left centre back, you have Abisha on the left, and you have Vargas as well, who they combine with. That caused Italy all kinds of problems. And I wouldn't be surprised if Southgate and his team had a look at that and thought, how are we going to counter that? Is it by adding an extra body in the defence? Because I think the way that they set up with the four at the back against Slovakia, I think is ripe for the Swiss to pick them off, because they are going to get outnumbered in those sort of lateral areas. And certainly if Mainu and Walker are playing on that right hand side, then I think there is a worry about what Switzerland could do there. So adding that extra body, having maybe three at the back, and then you have Walker and Alexander-Arnold, and then you have a little bit more cover in that area. I can see the rationale behind that. I think there is a legitimate question about how much tinkering you can do to a team, how many different plans you can cycle through before you basically start to unsettle the balance. But I think England are basically at a stage where, they can't actually get that much worse. There's not much you can do to diminish the level of this team. So it may well be worth a try.
Talking about the left side, but for England this time, we're talking about matching up to Switzerland, about making plans to combat X or Y or Z that Switzerland are going to offer. But about England going on the offensive, what about Luke Shaw? I mean, Jason, why isn't there more of a clamour now for this, especially with a wing-back situation, that Luke Shaw, with that security behind him, could get forward and cause real problems for the Swiss defence?
I think Gareth Southgate would love to play Luke Shaw. I think he'd love to start the competition with Luke Shaw, but I think Luke Shaw's unfortunately not fit enough, and I think that gamble hasn't worked out. Clearly, he's not been able to play so far. I think there's talk of Gareth Southgate's talking about him being able to play a part in Saturday's game. I don't think that will be from the start. And I think actually, as I said, the gamble hasn't worked. And with hindsight, he probably shouldn't have taken him to this tournament. The danger with Luke Shaw is if you do start him, he might just break down. Anyway, he worked incredibly hard to try and get fit. And I think it's been a very great frustration. And I think when we do our sort of, inquests into this tournament afterwards, obviously, unless England win it, I think that'll be one of the big issues that will be looked at as to how that gamble, that chance of just taking one left back who isn't fit, and even Kieran Trippier, who's been filling in there, he hasn't been 100% fit. That has backfired for England. It has become a big problem. And as I say, I think Southgate would love to get Luke Shaw onto the pitch. He rates him extremely highly and wanted to have him in his starting 11 from the first game, but it's just not been possible.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, when you think about that squad that was named the original 26. And I do remember thinking, OK, so yes, there's issues in defence and only 5 midfielders named. And of course, well, been through 3 of them already alongside Rice, with that first match involving Trent Alexander-Arnold there, then obviously Conor Gallagher, that didn't work, now Kobbie Mainoo, and the balance, etc. And I wonder whether this might be, one of those things, it's intense scrutiny this time of every single decision that's been made by Gareth Southgate, really from the outset, and now into this stage, Jonathan, when we think about him and the criticism he's endured at every single moment, when we think about this and look at the inside of the Metro here, defiant Gareth, motivated by the abuse or angry about the abuse, does this give you that feeling of, well, look, no matter what happens here, he's probably going to call it a day. He doesn't deserve to take any more of this flack for just trying to do his job?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the record for the last, however many shows we've done saying, I think Southgate should have gone after Qatar for his sanity and for ours. I think there is always a danger, and it's not. This is not nothing personal. This is just something that happens with time. When a manager has been in a job for a certain amount of time, they start to almost kind of defend their ideas. They start to defend their legacy. You do kind of work yourself into a little bit of a bunker mentality. And I think a lot of the decisions that Southgate has made in terms of selection, in terms of tactics, are a reaction or an attempt to preempt the criticism that he knows he's going to receive. And I think the virtue, like the great sort of, the uplifting quality of those early Southgate sides was that he was basically able to shut out the noise. And this was what he would promise the squad. I will shut out the noise for you. I will take the flak, and you just go out and play. And I think now we've reached the logical endpoint where they're basically reacting to the noise, where it's impossible. The noise has reached a level where, not only are you letting it in, but you're actually trying to use it as motivation. And I think that's just the cycle that this side have been through. It feels stale to me. I think, the fact that they've reached the quarterfinals is no great shakes. And I think, as much as I admire Southgate as a person, I do think there has been an element of staleness that has crept into this team. And that's just from having the same voice and the same voices for so long.
Yeah, and in fact, actually in Jason's piece, for the 4th successive tournament, all the tournaments that Southgate has overseen, England are in the quarterfinals. That record is unprecedented for an England manager, but it just seems like that's just gone completely, by the by, right? No one's talking about that because of the mood music around the way that England have just stumbled almost to this quarterfinal. But that being said, if it is a clean slate, Jason, as you've said, 100th game for Southgate, and England would love to make it 100, 102. That squad is 100% behind him. We know that. How do you feel right now as an England fan thinking about Saturday and the Swiss and the chance to get it right?
I know you'd be surprised to hear with my accent. I'm actually Scottish. So as much as I write about England and want them to do well, I don't support them. But at the same time, obviously, I want them to succeed in this tournament. I'm not very hopeful for Saturday. Obviously, I've talked an awful lot about, the possibility of them resetting and restarting, but it seems like a long way back. You never know, though, in a one-off game, it could just happen. It could be opportunity for them. That's what we're all sort of pinning our hopes on. But at the moment, I'm not hugely optimistic. I think it could be one of those games actually that goes all the way to a penalty shootout, and it could be a flip of a coin as to who wins it from there. I think Switzerland are a very, very difficult team to beat. They're playing very, very well. I know people will throw their arms up in the air saying it's only Switzerland, but I do think that is a little bit of arrogance from England, which always seems to catch up on them. We saw that before in terms of the way they talked about teams. And if you look at the teams that have gone out of this tournament, we talk about Slovakia, they were a decent side. I mean, Slovenia, again, they didn't get beaten heavily, and they were in England's group. They only went out on a penalty shootout to Portugal. I think it's something that people need to get their heads around a bit more, that teams aren't going to roll over and be beaten heavily anymore. It just doesn't happen in international football. I know it sounds crazy saying that when we talk about England having £100 million footballers, But in saying all of that, I'm still trying to be optimistic about Saturday. I'm not hugely optimistic, but I'm trying to remain optimistic for my own sanity, as Jonathan talks about.
Well, listen, Jason, you may be Scottish, but on Saturday we'll take you as an England fan, and we'll take that little dose of mini optimism. We'll take it and run with it as far as we can. We'll see what happens. Gents, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. You're watching Backpages tonight. Welcome back to you at home. Welcome back to The Guardian's Jonathan Liew and Jason Burt from The Telegraph. OK, we're going to talk domestic football. Manchester United, Erik Ten Hag. Jonathan, it is done. He's signed a contract that extends to 2026. Maybe not the outcome that we were all expecting a few months ago, but now that that is done, do you feel that now, compared to the bonkers Manchester United of last season, when it was all a bit crazy and slightly falling apart, that they are now putting in the pieces of the jigsaw for everything to have more consistency and start from a more solid base for the 24-25 season?
I think that's the plan. I think that's, I think the early signs are good. They've talked about sort of complete alignment and they've certainly taken their time over, getting this decision right and, going through all the, assembling the team basically, and going through all the various kind of points that need to be gone through with any contract renegotiation. There's also talk that Ten Hag keeps his transfer veto and things like that. So this is clearly something that they could have. I think United could have rushed into this. There is so much upheaval. There's been so much turmoil going on, and I think the new people that are coming in have wanted to actually have a sit down and talk to everyone, and I think gauge the temperature as well. The staff will have had their own opinion. The fans certainly have had an opinion, and as much as it's easy to laugh at Manchester United. I do this every week. Basically, we have a little chuckle at Manchester United. There is a structure there now, and there are pieces in place, and we don't yet know how those pieces are going to work together. But it is the bones of a plan, and that is basically something that United have not had for quite a few years.
Yeah. Jason, what's your read on Erik Ten Hag and I suppose the dynamic and his position, not just as head coach and extended contract, but in terms of the sort of the power and where that lies at Old Trafford? Is it enhanced? Is it diminished? Is it kind of the same?
I actually always expected him to stay because United have got so much else to sort out at the moment. They did obviously talk to other managers, but they didn't get a sense that these were the right people for them. And I think with him, I think what he'd hoped actually was to get a longer contract with this new deal. It's effectively a triggered an extension in his contract. It's not really a new contract as such because he had 12 months extension that could be triggered on top of the 1 year left he has on his contract. And I think it was important to him at the same time to keep that kind of veto on transfers. I think Manchester United wanted to change the title of who was in charge of the first team to be head coach rather than manager. He's clearly resisted that. In his defence, what he's argued very, very strongly, and I think with some justification, is that he has inherited a bit of a mess at Manchester United, that the recruitment was all over the place, that the structure of the club wasn't right, that it was an unhappy place, the owners obviously wanted to sell up, and so on. He's been the guy who's tried to hold all that together. Now, clearly at the same time, he's made big mistakes, certainly in the transfer market. What I hope happens now is he has much less say in what happens in terms of transfers, but obviously can keep his veto. But they need to try and scout and find players much better because they wasted a huge amount of money over the last couple of years, and that is on Erik Ten Hag as well. The money they've paid for Anthony and so on and so forth. It's well documented. So what I'm hoping now for his sake is that he gets a proper structure around him. Obviously, Dan Ashworth has now arrived. Jason Wilcox is there, Omar Barada. So hopefully getting a proper structure around him that he can then thrive and do well at Manchester United. Or if it doesn't work out, then they will move him on, I think, quickly because he hasn't got probably the longer term deal that he wanted. He's got an extension triggering his contract. So I think it's almost like an uneasy marriage at the moment. And
I guess, given that structure is building, you say, the bones are there. Very briefly, Jonathan, what does he need to achieve? If he is to stay there beyond this year, in a couple of years, what do you think is necessary? Where's the line for him?
Well, I just think some sign of improvement, some sign of evolution in the playing style. That they're not getting, they're not getting beaten 4-0 at Crystal Palace. I think that is as important as any kind of tangible achievement, whether it's qualifying for the Champions League or winning a trophy. Obviously, these are tangible goals that the fans will want. But I think because this is a kind of a long-term project, they do want to see a sort of evolution in the playing style. They don't want to, they don't want to be kind of scrapping their way to a fourth place. I think if there is evidence of that, then this could be a productive relationship.
OK, let's move back to your paper, Jason, and Andy Murray. And yes, it was sad to see him, obviously nowhere near full fitness and defeated alongside his brother Jamie in the first round of the men's doubles. But really, it was all about the interview. And speaking to Sue Barker on court afterwards, it really was just taking us once again back through the roller coaster and in just utter awe and admiration of what he's achieved despite today's result.
Well, certainly, even getting onto the court today was a triumph of mind over matter. I mean, he clearly wasn't fit enough to even play, but he forced himself to do so, and that just shows the sort of the iron will and the determination, almost the belligerence he has, which has marked a lot of his career. His body at times has let him down, but he's obviously kept going, and I think it was a fantastic tribute. We obviously had the tribute also from Wimbledon and the various rivals he's had over the years, such as Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer, and we're starting to see. Obviously, clearly the end now for one of the greatest ever sportsmen this country has produced, and he has been a magnificent advocate for tennis and fantastic achievement, 3 Grand Slams. And I think obviously in an era when there were other great players, he has shone and rivaled those players, and I think he deserved that tribute today on court. And I think it was a really nice touch for Sue Barker to come out and do that interview, because obviously we know the history they've got in terms of the previous interviews they had together and what they meant. And as it was a very emotional moment that was far more important than the match itself, the game itself. And he deserved that tribute today.
Really, really briefly, Jonathan, instead of 10, 15 seconds or so, what do you think is his greatest legacy he leaves?
We put athletes on incredible pedestals. We worship them. And I think the nicest thing you can say about Andy Murray, the most remarkable thing, is that he proved himself worthy of the devotion that was invested in. He was as good a person as he was a player, and I hope that's his legacy.